warehouse, and I was a courier, and I worked my way up. Was there for 2 years, and then wanted to get into sales, and they didn't want to give me the opportunity, so I went to go work for Wright Medical Technology for 6 years. And I made it a personal mission to go after every Stryker account, you know, since they wouldn't give me the opportunity. And started taking a bunch of their business, and then they hired me back, and I've been back with them for 15 years. So I've been doing this been in actual sales for 22 years, and was just like a warehouse guy for the first 2 years. Stryker was founded in 1941, and what makes us a little bit different from the other companies is that we were actually founded by an orthopedic surgeon named Homer Stryker from Kalamazoo, Michigan. You know, you gotta be a pretty tough dude today's time to be named Homer, but whatever. And some of the other companies out there, like Zimmer, they were founded in 1908 by a sales rep. DePuy was founded in 1895 by another sales rep, and both of those companies, they were selling fiber splints to replace the wooden splints back in the day. So Homer Stryker, he actually developed a company called Orthopedic Frame Company, and he was the first one to design the turn-in frame bed. So Stryker, everybody kind of associates us with hospital beds. He was the inventor of that. And the whole premise behind that bed was that you could move patients around and still keep, you know, body parts mobile and immobile if you needed to. He also designed the cast cutting saw, which there was a major need for that with all the fiber splints that were out there. And he also designed the walking heel, which was a orthotic, pretty much arch support for back then. So Stryker is a very aggressive company. In 2018, we had sales of $13.5 billion. We had 5 deals last year that were for $2.4 billion. We believe in buying companies. Nobody's going to be buying us. And in the last 5 years, we've had 55 deals worth over $13.8 billion. So we are an aggressive company. We spend a lot of money on R&D. And just to kind of give you a figure on Stryker too, Standard & Poor, which is what the New York Stock Exchange is pretty much kind of based on, we are running at essentially 186%, and the average for the Standard & Poor is 76%. We're the only orthopedic company in the last 5 years that has shown a gain. Zimmer right now is running at like 56%, Smith & Nephew's at around 79%, and DePuy's at 84%, and again, we're at 186%. We are a Fortune 500 company. We are, for 5 years consecutive, been rated in the best workplaces to work, and in 2018, we got a Women's Choice Award for best workplaces for women. And I actually got the opportunity to go up there in December with Dr. Swayze for a revision meeting, and that was the first time in almost 16 years that I've been up to Stryker, and it's kind of amazing all the people you see around there. You think you see a bunch of factory workers, and it's not. It's a bunch of engineers, all from MIT, Yale. They hire, you know, the smartest of the smartest for engineering, and that's pretty much what they're looking for these days. So anyway, when you're talking about total joints, you're dealing with arthritis, and arthritis is essentially the inflammation of the joint tissue. And what happens there is that the cartilage starts breaking down, and you start developing osteophytes, which is essentially the body reacting to that cartilage loss. So the osteophytes start wearing the cartilage out, and you start getting bone-on-bone contact, and that's essentially what gives the patients pain. And I'm going to talk about I'll talk about total knees first. So the first total knee was actually put in 1968, and there's 2 different versions of total knees that you can do today. There's a cemented version and a press fit version. We're the only company out there that has a true press fit femur and a press fit tibia. Zimmer does have one, but you have to kind of mix match 2 different systems to get that, and it's actually based off of a 15-year-old knee. So the press fit is essentially where you can drive the implant into the bone, and you do not need cement. So it's just fancy carpentry work. And essentially what they do to ensure that you're getting bone growth is they use something called 3D printing. And so essentially what they're doing is they're taking all this rough titanium that they used when they were filing down other implants, and they just collect it and collect it and collect it, and then you run it through a 3D printer, and it's just overlay over overlay of titanium, and the bone accepts it because there's all these little pores that the bone can grow into. It's also got these sharp little pegs on it, so you can kind of feel, and just be careful when you grab that, but that's what that's made out of. And that's, if you're gonna press fit, and the femur and the tibia both have that titanium overlay 3D printing on it. We're the only company right now that's doing that for both the femur and the tibia. The other version would be a cemented version. You can see this is smooth on the back. That's for the cement to adhere to. You wouldn't want to put cement on a press fit. You could if you got into a bind, but you wouldn't want to because the rough substrate of that would essentially start wearing out the cement, and you get an early failure. So this would be considered like a cemented prosthesis, and you can see how smooth that is. There's also two different ways that most guys were trained on doing total knees. There's a cruciate retaining and there's a posterior stabilized. So on the cruciate retaining, they always take the ACL when they're doing a total knee, but the difference would be they leave the PCL behind and leave it intact when they're doing a cruciate retaining knee. Some guys were taught to actually take the PCL, and when they do that, you've got to have a mechanism to prevent the knee from dislocating. So when they take that PCL, they have to take a box out of the femur, and then this post that is on the insert is what reduplicates your PCL to prevent that slide back action. And that's all that post is there to do. So there are two different versions of a knee, cruciate retaining and posterior stabilized. On total knees, what they're really trying to alleviate is naturally pain. Cement is an actual instant buffer on total knee replacements. That's why a lot of people still do cemented knees, because the patient's getting an instant relief. Press fit takes about 6 to 8 weeks to really start growing in, and it's really about 3 months until the patient feels like it's a normal knee again, because they need to let time for the bone to remodel into the implant. But once the press fit knees are established and the bone grows into them, I mean, they're just as well fixed as any cemented knee out there. So that's really about it on the knees that I can think of. Anybody got any questions? Sweet. All right, y'all ready? Yeah.
What is the benefit to cemented versus non-cemented?
Well, cemented is going to offer you instant pain relief post-op, and that's essentially it.
Is it better to do non-cemented?
If I was going to have one, I'd have a press fit knee, and I'm not saying that because that's where the technology is, because of the revisions that I've done over the years. And I figured out I've probably seen about 11,000 surgeries in 24 years. The press fit ones are a real pain to get out of the bone, and when you do have to take them out, you're usually tearing up the bone to get it out. But when they're in, they are in. And when you do the revisions, it's usually just for like a poly swap, where you're just swapping out that tibial insert, because over time, this part will be the one that wears out. So they just essentially pop this piece out, slip a new one in, and that's usually a lot of the revisions. So.
Don't they is it, I thought that it was normally that they cemented on older people and press fit on the.
Not necessarily. Back in the day, they did.
Okay.
I mean, like Dr. Swayze, he's press fitting 86-year-olds, 85-year-olds, 80-year-olds. If they've got good quality bone, there's nothing wrong with press fitting them. So.
One more question.
Sure.
How long do we have to, do they wait for revision? When do they need the revision?
It's usually when the polyethylene, that plastic insert wears out, is usually the classic indication of it. And what they'll see on x-ray is you'll start getting microparticles of this polyethylene that's starting to break down. And and so then the body kind of treats it as a foreign body, so it'll start attacking little microparticles. You'll start getting osteolysis, and then that'll lead to like bone loss and so forth. So radiographically, when they follow them, they can start seeing when that polyethylene's breaking down.
It's the same for breastfeed as well?
It is, yeah. This doesn't change.
Is the patient usually symptomatic though before they notice the radiographic pain?
Yeah, they'll start getting some swelling, some pain, but usually swelling in it. And then on total hips, the first total hip was put in 1962, and it was actually, that wasn't the first hip ever done in America. It was actually done in the 1950s, and they were doing it on canines because they wanted to study the effect on animals before humans. And Stryker, actually, we specialize in a lot of the canine implants that we sell at veterinary hospitals and clinics. And it's crazy when you see the size of some of these implants. I mean, hips can be like that big. Yeah, we don't sell Stryker diapers for dogs. So essentially, on a total hip, what's happening is the patient will come into the clinic, see an orthopedic surgeon, and usually they have a leg lengthening issue. It's one of the major things because the cartilage is breaking down, and so the leg usually comes in a little shorter. You have your femur and your acetabulum, and what they're doing when they're doing a total hip replacement is they're essentially lopping off the femoral head, and they're going to ream the socket out. When they ream the socket out, they're going to throw a cup in there, and they have different options. You have one that does not have screw holes, you have another one that does have screw holes, and then you have different substrates on these as well. We have a proprietary substrate called hydroxyapatite, which is what everybody was using back in the day, but now since we have the 3D printing, we can go to the titanium. You can see it looks a little bit different, and it's got a different surface on it as well. Want to hand those out, you can. Y'all probably heard of like a bipolar versus total hip, and essentially all they're doing on a bipolar is they're not doing a cut. They're essentially just cutting off the head, putting in a femoral stem, and they're letting the ball articulate inside of the acetabulum. Those are usually for like your low demand elderly patients that aren't going to be real mobile. But with the activity level of the elderly now, they are pretty much doing total hips on a lot of these patients that they would do bipolars on. And also the doctors get reimbursed a little bit more for the total hips, so naturally they're going to lean towards that side of things. So on the total hip, they also have a cemented version and a press fit version. Cemented was by far the choice on everybody back in the day, but now you hardly see anybody doing cemented. Everybody's press fitting it because when they do have to go back in and do a revision, the cement is a pain in the butt to remove, and they just don't want to really mess around with it. Also, the cement can spike the patient's temperature. They can get an exothermic temperature spike from it. So anesthesia really has to monitor the patient when they are cementing in the prosthesis. With a press fit, you don't have to worry about that. They also have different head options, and the reason on that is because there's literature out there that's saying the cobalt chrome metal heads are wearing the polyethylene out a little bit quicker than ceramic would. And there are two different types of ceramic. They used to have an aluminum ceramic. This is the one that everybody used to put in, but the problem with this is you start getting stripe wear. So essentially when the ceramic starts rubbing on the ceramic insert or the lip of the cup, you'll start getting these, and you'll see it on this one, there's a little scratch on it, and over time all the little scratches that start digging into the polyethylene will essentially wear the polyethylene out quicker. So what they've gone to, and every company gets their ceramic from the same company, it's called BioLox. They're out of Germany. They make it for every orthopedic company out there. The women like it because it's pink. You know, we don't have a blue one for men or nothing like that. Every single one of them's pink. But this is a stronger type of ceramic, and you don't get as much stripe wear on it. And it takes about 18,000 pounds of pressure to break these, even though it's ceramic. People think you can drop it or whatever and it'll fracture. but that's not the case. I've only ever seen one of these break, but when they do, it is nasty, because, I mean, essentially it's glass in the body, and so they have to go in there with C-arm and fluoro and all that, and retrieve the particles of these out. But when it did break, it was in like 3 big pieces. But it's almost impossible to break those, but not impossible. So on cemented, you're gonna have a smooth surface because the cement has to adhere to it. Same thing like on the cemented knee press fit. You're gonna have your hydroxyapatite coating up in the proximal area, and they usually don't put anything on the distal end because if they have to revise it, it's real hard to get down in the femur, and sometimes they'll have to do an osteotomy to retrieve it. So most of the companies just have all their HA coating up on the proximal end of the femur. And then they do make other type stems, so if you have like a revision stem or something, these are monolithic stems, so the trunnion, that's this part right here, is actually built into the stem, so there's no way to cheat reversion or something. And so sometimes when these patients come in for revisions, their anatomy starts getting a little messed up because you're having soft tissue deficiencies, ligament instabilities, and so forth. So you would need a stem that can have where you can kind of cheat. And so with this, you can kind of dial in your version independent of your stem, so you can drive your stem in first, and then you can set this any way you want, and then you can lock it up here. The only problem with stems like this is you have more chances of fretting because you have more moving parts. So over time, you could get metallosis, and it's just, you know, more areas for something to fail. So a lot of people are still, even on revisions, going with a monolithic molded stem. It's just forged, and they go with these. Another thing on the total knees, we are the leader in the robotic knee. Our knee is called the Mako knee. And if anybody, just like at a hospital, the Da Vinci, I mean, every patient now wants to go in and get a Da Vinci robotic general surgery. It's kind of the same way on the total knees. About 1 in every 4 knees that we sell as a company is a Mako robotic knee. And essentially what you're doing, the patient comes in and gets CT scans of their knee, and you set all your periphery points into the system, and then essentially the robotic arm makes all the cuts, does all the burring, does all the soft tissue balancing. So essentially instead of an 8-inch incision, they can do the total knee through like a 3-inch incision, and you're eliminating, because of how the CT scans do it, they can predict the optimal position of the knee. And so once you put your points in, I mean, essentially it's like playing a video game. The robot just starts making all the cuts and everything. And we are by far the leader in the robotic knee. Zimmer is coming out with one this year called the ROSA, but they're having a hard time controlling the arm. The arm, so that when you set in these points, it's got something called a padding point, and the saw and the burr cannot go past these points that you set in. Zimmer does not have that option, so the robot arm can still kind of sky the way from where you're intending it to cut. On total hips, you're going to hear probably anterior versus posterior approach. About 80% of the hips are still done by a posterior approach, and 20% are done through an anterior. And the advantages and disadvantages of those are, in a posterior approach, they're essentially, it's a muscle separating, muscle separating approach, to where they're going to actually take down the gluteus maximus, your external rotators, and it is a little bit harder to rehab from that. So that's why you're seeing more people doing the anterior. But the drawback to the anterior is they've got a smaller incision, so we're seeing implants being malpositioned because the surgeon can't physically see as well as a posterior approach, and they're leading to more fractures in the femur because you got to come in at a different angle and so forth. higher incidence of radiation exposure for everybody in there. And I'm not knocking on either one because they both have their advantages and disadvantages. But all the literature is saying that after 6 weeks, it doesn't matter what approach they do, the patients feel the same regardless of what approach. The advantage of the anterior approach is that you're doing a muscle splitting approach, so you're not separating the gluteus maximus and the external rotators, you're just kind of sneaking around them. So the patients do rehab a little bit quicker than the posterior approach. And that's really about it.
We got a question.
Morgan, let me give a shout out to my favorite scripture.
Okay.
And today it'll be Alex, so. Wednesday.
But you did it register. Anyway, is there a life expectancy for these?
It used to be about 12 years. Real good would be about 15 years. They're saying now it's getting up to about 20 years. And again, on these, it's usually that polyethylene insert that wears out. And the same on the hip. There's a polyethylene insert that goes into the shell. It's right here. And eventually that'll wear out. So it's compression molded poly. And just eventually over time, that'll wear out. The metal implants will last forever, as long as there's not an infection or anything like that. So, and also on total hips, when doctors are getting freaked out in there, the two reasons why they get sued on total hips is usually a leg length discrepancy, or if there's dislocation. If a patient, comes in way too short, there's a lot of complications that can cause, and then chronic dislocators. So those are the two things they're always kind of watching out for while they're doing total hips. You'll see them, they'll take the knees and they'll measure where their patella is at, and that's kind of how they determine if they're restoring the patient's leg anatomy back to when they originally started.
What would cause chronic dislocation on a hip?
Usually if the cup is malpositioned, they try to have it at a 45-degree angle, but if it's too vertical, essentially you're gonna impinge on so if it's too vertical, essentially you're gonna impinge this trunnion right here, it's gonna impinge early and it's gonna pop out. And that's usually what it is. So if your idea would be that to where you're getting, full range of motion, but if this thing's too vertical, it's gonna lever itself out. Yes, ma'am.
How many hospitals do you have that use the little lead?
Pretty much. Well, the word is that AMC bought one last year, but they're not using it. So they're going to move that to the Windy Hill Orthopedic Center. They're using it a lot on uni knees, but they're doing a lot of total knees with it now. And we've also got the software now to do total hips, but it's expensive. I mean, just the Mako unit's $1.2 million, and then the software, each upgrade software is about $300 grand. So, but it's